Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. Hey, everybody, where are we going today on our Food, Wine, and Travel Show with the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association, who we call IFWTWA. It's a lot easier. You can check them out at IFWTWA.org. Today, we're chatting with IFWTWA member Barbara Redding. She is a travel writer. She is a retired journalist, and we love it when her stories come in and when she joins us here on Big Blend Radio. And today, she's going to be talking about Wales, beautiful Wales, lush green Wales with a lot of history. She's going to talk about a national park there, castles, fortresses, you name it. So welcome back, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Lisa. Happy to be here. I always like talking about Wales. My visit earlier this year was my first time there, but I had been to England, I'd been to Scotland. And as I say in my story, it's kind of Wales sometimes is an afterthought if you're going to the British Isles. And I was really happy that I finally got there. And it really is an amazing, amazing place in a small package.
And green.
And green, yes. And I remember asking somebody that I have been to Ireland as well. And they said, well, it's the same weather. It just comes across the Irish Sea and all that rain goes to Wales next.
Yeah, and one of your photos, you had this beautiful, picture of heather and different kinds. I mean, it was gorgeous. I mean, the heather part. I mean, yeah, I kind of hear Kate Bush in the back of my head. But anyway, yeah, this heather is just beautiful. And it's something you don't see. I know you're in Austin, Texas, right? You don't see heather that often, do you?
No, and the way that it just kind of fills in the rocky crevices in various parts of Wales, it was just really, really pretty, really, just interesting to look at and to photograph and to see it against, the backdrop of a lot of, kind of those rocky cliffs. It was just really, really special.
So obviously you went to Cardiff, right?
Yes.
That was a main point that, got to do Cardiff, but you flew into England to get to Wales, right? You went from London to England, to Wales?
Yes, and that's generally, if you're coming from the US, it's the easiest way because you can usually get a non-stop from a lot of cities in the US, and that's what from Austin, Texas, you can fly direct into Heathrow. And then what we did was, rented a car, and then we could have started in Cardiff, but we decided we wanted to see the castles first. And we were actually, after Wales, we headed south. So we decided to start in the north in Conwy, which is this great little town and kind of the center of the castle district of North Wales, and really had a lovely time in Conwy. There's just a lot to see from there. You mentioned Snowdonia National Park. It's just outside of Conwy. So we were able to do that, to go to Anglesey Island, to walk parts of the Wales Coast Path, which is all over the coast, as a matter of fact. And so we were able to see a lot of things. So really, the castles are pretty special in North Wales, for sure.
The castles, to me, as a kid, I lived in England for a year and a half. Nancy and I lived there, and we toured all of England, Scotland, and Wales. And as a little kid, I became obsessed about the castles because, it's like maybe you go from the fairy tale thing. And then I was in school and you were being taught, remember having a history book of the British Isles, and the inside of the covers were like all the matriarchs and the kings. And, here's all the kings and the queens. And I'm like, who's who? How many Louis do we have? And Georges and all of that. But as a kid, I was like, this stuff really happened. And when you go to the castles, it just becomes really reality of how they built these so long ago. And then you talked about seeing the Roman walls, right? That's another whole crazy thing. When you think about this it's ancient history, really, to me. But you go into these castles and you're like, how did they build them? They built them strategically. Like you talked about that also with the forts and fortresses. Like they did the strategy. And then it's like, then you go and you see the jewels and the dresses and the outfits, and then go down into the dungeons and the jails and all of that. I mean, it's pretty wow, isn't it, when you have that experience of it becoming very real?
Yeah, I think it does give you a sense beyond kind of, as you said, the fairy tale idea of a castle that, all of the, when you think about all of the manpower and probably, many people lost their lives constructing those castles, and a lot of people who did the work were probably not doing it voluntarily, but
Yeah,
because of
right.
some kind of servitude requirement on the part of whoever was king at the time. And so you kind of get the grandeur of thinking about who lived there and what kind of life they lived, but also the rest of the people that were involved with the castle, the people who worked there, the people who built the castle. And I think in Wales, the sense that they were built really to intimidate the Welsh people into submission. It wasn't, they weren't building them so that people could go and have a party or get married in the castle.
Yeah, right.
It was a fortress, and that the English were going to defend themselves against the Welsh, who at the time would really rather have been independent. And that wasn't going to happen. It was so long ago. It is interesting, I think, to visit Wales now, and there has really been a resurgence of interest in the Welsh language and Wales as an entity of its own, kind of like Scotland. They have a parliament that's now meeting regularly. They are taking on many of the administrative duties that once used to be taken care of in England, and
Yeah, because
I
things
think are,
changed.
yeah, so that they're asserting much more, independence. And so it's interesting to see that, and to, appreciate they have a long and challenging history, but they are part of the British island, they're part of the United Kingdom, and I think they're, working on a new relationship with
Mm.
the royal family, as well as the governing body in England as well.
It is fascinating, and I want everyone to know that your article about this, and you can see photos, and the article is up on nationalparktraveling.com. Just click on the link there and you'll see that. While you were there, you also mentioned like some parts of it are they're looking at the environment too. They're kind of becoming green in a way in their cities and what they're doing. And I think it was Cardiff in specific seems to be okay, we're going to take that on as well.
Yeah, I think there's a real and strong environmental consciousness in Wales. I think it's a
Wow.
beautiful country that was exploited in certain places. I mean, Cardiff was the leading exporter of coal for many, many
Wow.
years. And as a result, coal is a dirty business, and it
Hmm.
really polluted the Cardiff Bay and the air and everything else, in around that area. A lot of the mountains in Wales were stripped for coal mining and other types of mineral extraction. But pretty much those days are in the past. There's some mining still going on, but it's minimal. And I think that what Wales is trying to do is to heal the parts of the country that were damaged by this, and then to really focus on turning them into the kinds of places that people will come to visit for their not natural resources, but for their natural beauty. And that's
Mm.
when the pictures that I had seen of Cardiff Bay, when it was basically just sooty and dirty and nasty.
Right.
And then they built this barrage, which is a type of dam that allowed the fresh water to fill up the bay and kind of, push out the old nasty salt water that had accumulated there, and really turned it into a beautiful freshwater lake that you see sailboats and
Okay.
and I think people go swimming in it now too, which was probably unheard of in those days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because even when we lived in England, it was in the 80s.
Mhm,
And it was kind of Wales was kind of looked down upon a bit. I'm just saying.
mhm, mhm.
I remember some comedies and certain things, and I'm not going there because it's not fair,
Right.
but it was funny. But just certain things were funny. But everything they showed And there was one joke in particular. There was okay, so not the 9 o'clock news, was kind of like a spoof on the news. And this is, I'm dating myself, but it had Ron Atkinson and everything in it, and it's really funny. But
Mhm,
they did a whole thing on whales, and it was these smokestacks. Like you could see what was going on from the coal industry. Yet
mhm,
those people work so hard. So you think about going from building these big castles to now
mhm,
you're going to work in the coal industry.
mhm,
So
mhm,
the people are hard stock, let's put it that
mhm,
way, hard work, persevering. Um, I they've broken their backs basically for that country, I think.
mhm. Yeah, and I think that they're very, these days I think there's a lot of pride
Hmm.
in their country, and letting people know that they're not the butt of jokes anymore, that
No,
they
no, I hated to bring that up, but it's kind of the truth. I mean, it is
uh,
the truth. And I just want people to understand, I don't think it is anymore, but in that
right,
era, like that was kind of this, and it could have just been where I was at the time, but it could have just been that one little period of time. I mean, everyone picks on each other all the time on everything, right?
right,
So
right,
let's
yeah.
let's don't even start with our own country right now. So but the thing is, Wales is they've worked hard, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, they've really blossomed, and that's I thought one of my favorite places was the Wales Coast Path, and
Oh
they
yes.
are really the first nation and only nation, as far as I know now, that created a path that goes all the way around their coast, and so that's 870, I think, miles, if I recall my article. But it's so you can walk on the beach, you can walk on cliffs. It's really a lovely way to explore the country, and it's very environmentally conscious because you're
Mhm.
walking. There are parts that you can ride bicycles on as well. I think like parts of Cardiff, it's a cement path or a hard pack path, so that you can ride bikes. But mostly it's aimed at people who just want to walk, stroll, hike, and see the countryside. And we
Mhm.
were, I think, one of the special places I really enjoyed was like north of Cardiff, and along that coast, we saw some old bunkers from World War II that were still there. There was a shipwreck around along the shore, a sailboat so there were so many, and just the tide pools. I mean, it was just a very
Mm.
lovely place, and there's a lot of history there, just, walking along the coast.
Wow. I love that. That kind of thing is my kind of holiday. I
Mhm,
want to just go for a walk and not come back for another 10 days or something. So, I
mhm,
mean, you got a little bit of everything. And tell me about the national park, because I know our audience on our nationalparktraveling.com site and our parks and travel folks on our podcast, they're going to want to hear about the park itself too, because
mhm,
I mean, I love hearing about national parks around the world. I mean, America created the National Park Service and that whole system, and everyone followed suit after that. I always thought it was Africa first, but that's because I grew up there. So I don't know. But it was here, this country. So tell us about that park, because that had to be pretty epic with all the just that lushness, right?
yes, yes, Snowdonia National Park is really spectacular, and it surrounds the highest peak in Wales, which is also the highest peak in England as well.
Oh,
It's Scotland has some higher peaks, but Snowdonia is the highest in Wales and the highest in England. Now, again, I mean, it doesn't compare to the Rocky Mountains, but it's a pretty good sized peak, and it's very different from, I think, other peaks that I've been to, in the sense that it's kind of, you know, short grass, not a lot of trees, a very rocky hills. Like, I'm looking at the photograph behind you.
mm-hmm.
That may in fact be Snowdonia, because it's just on the other side of Conwy, which is the Conwy Castle is right behind you. But it has that kind of look, but it's so they're very craggy, and they
Mm-hmm.
do have high mountain lakes too. So
Oh,
we actually considered you can walk up to the top, to the summit, the highest peak in England and Wales. But when they told us it was going to take about 6-7 hours, and it was a very warm day in Wales that day, we decided to take the train. And so they have these, I'm thinking it's kind of like a cog train
Uh-huh.
where they're open air cars, and there's
Oh,
an old steam engine that some of them are converted to electric, but that pushes you up to the top. And it's just a beautiful way to see the countryside without too much exertion, shall we say.
yeah,
But it was fascinating because on the way up we see the hikers, we see the rocks, we see the sheep, and it was just a very kind of glorious way to to see the countryside of Wales. And then we got to the top. They have like a restaurant and a little gift shop, and then a couple of different
yeah.
peaks where you can climb up to actually get a total panoramic view. So it's really
That's
and
awesome.
an amazing park, and it's a place that I think people from that part of the country have been going for many years. I think it's one of their oldest parks.
Mm,
And Wales, again, a small country, they have three big national parks, and that's really the number one park where I think most people who visit Wales will want to see that park, because it really is
mm.
spectacular, and lots of hiking trails at the bottom. And just, we had a rental car, so we were able to drive around and see various parts of it. We saw waterfalls, and
Oh,
said you could see some old stone buildings that maybe had been occupied by farmers in another century, and they were kind of falling down. And just a really pretty spectacular park with a lot to see and a lot of hiking to do.
that's awesome. That is awesome when you think about it, it just going into just a whole other mountain compared to what we
Mhm,
have here, because it is different. Maybe in
mhm,
the Pacific Northwest, but even still, it's not. The lighting is different. Look at that. Lighting is different.
mhm,
It is
mhm.
different. So what about the food and the lodging? And let's talk about where you were staying. Are there Airbnbs or bed and breakfast, hotels? What would you say is kind of
We
the
we yeah,
overview?
we did a mix of places where we stayed. Now, we did one of my absolute favorite places. We stayed in a farmhouse
Oh,
in,
cool.
in a little town called Fairy Glen.
Oh, now see, who doesn't want that? I want
I know,
I want to go to a town like that.
yeah, it was kind of one of those fluky things that I happened to see this place, and I was like, it just looks so idyllic, that I was like, I didn't really know that it was kind of down a long winding road, and then near this little town. So by the time we got there, we were kind of like nervous because of the drive. We did find out later that there was an easier way to get there, thank goodness. But it was just the cutest little town. It was just, there was basically a sign that had the name of the town, and then it had a little restaurant and inn, and then our farmhouse was within walking distance. And when
Cool.
we were kind of lost trying to find the house, and the lady on the phone who owned the house just said, it's the next one past the sheep farm. you know we're driving
Turn
around
left at
going,
the
well,
tree.
it
Yeah.
looks like lots of sheep. How are we going to know this? And
Yeah.
she said, I guess last sheep farm before you go into town. So I think we did miss it. We found the town, then we turned around, and then we found this house. But it was an old farmhouse that this woman and her husband had bought. He was a photographer, very
Oh, cool.
accomplished photographer, and the pictures in the house were just really spectacular. And it had this great patio, and then in the bedrooms were upstairs. And when you looked out the window, all you could see was this hillside covered with sheep.
Oh, that's cool. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I think that was my favorite, one of my all-time favorites. When you visit a lot of places, you sometimes end up in places where you stay that you're like, what was I thinking? Or how did I
Yeah.
find this? But this was one of those, like, wow, I'm so impressed that I found this place. And
Yeah, and you're in it, and you're in Wales. Like you're
yes,
in the countryside, you're in the farming. You can,
right. And
yeah,
it was tempting to, just to kind of hang out there, because it was such a
yeah.
such a cute place. But we had a lot to see, so it was our base. And when we found out that you could actually hit a main highway pretty close, we drove along the coast. That's,
Mm.
we visited some of the other islands or some of the other castles from there. And then also it was a kind of about a 30-minute drive to Anglesey Island.
Mm.
And that is a pretty famous island well, it's connected to the rest of Wales, but it's kind of the way it's situated. It's kind of like an island, and it's also in the main town is where the ferries. You can take a ferry to, um, I don't think it's Dublin. I can't think of what city, but anyway, you can go to Ireland from there. They have
Oh.
ferries that go back and forth, and I was so tempted to do that just for just to kind of see what it was like, but we just kind of ran out of time. But the lighthouse at Anglesey is because the island kind of sits up on this cliff, and then it has this lighthouse that's down at the water, and it's like 400 steps to go down there. And the day that we were there was just this amazing fog that
Oh.
you could we were at the top and looking down, and sometimes you could see the lighthouse, and sometimes it would fade away, but it was just such a the views from that cliff were just so spectacular. We were just I would have on a better day would have liked to have walked down and actually explored the lighthouse. So I guess we'll do that next time.
Oh, you want to go back then?
Yes, as I said, small country, but it was just so idyllic that
Yeah.
I think you could, so many interesting smaller towns and the roads just meandering through, the sheep pastures. I mean, it was just kind
It's
of like,
villages. It's true
yeah,
villages.
it is.
You know.
It's kind of like around every bend, you would see something else that was beautiful, or a river, or park, or farmland. It just, it's very pristine and, you know, just lovely.
Yeah. Now, what was Cardiff like?
Cardiff was
Because that's like
interesting.
the opposite side of things, right? A little bit.
Yes, because it's more of a big city, and it's pretty. It was kind of like we had gone through this idyllic countryside, driving from North Wales down to the south coast, and so all of a sudden you're in a busy big city, and it was a bit of a shock, until we, found our place, and then got oriented to the city. We were close enough that we could walk to Cardiff Castle and to the downtown shopping area. And so once we kind of got our bearings, I thought it really is an interesting town. I mean, it's a little grittier than, say, the small towns of the coast.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of had a little bit of thinking about London, only smaller, where you have some really cool parts, and then you have some kind of parts that probably need a little, paint and touch up. But some interesting, I mean, the castle itself is huge. It's one of the biggest castles I think in England and in
Wow.
Wales. It was originally a Roman fort, so they have one wall that's exposed that they have researched and realized that it was built by the Romans in the first century. So
Amazing.
that's pretty amazing. And then the Norman invasion in like the 11th century, they came in and built this huge castle keep on the grounds. And so that is still standing. So you climb up, you get a great view of that. And the castle itself is still walled. You can walk on some of the walls, and one of the walls was actually kind of hollowed out so that during World War II, people could sleep there at night during the air raid. And they had some great old timey posters about, basically trying to entice people to come and stay to be safe, but I could see why you wouldn't really want. It was kind of a dank, dark place.
Well, yeah, that's what, like when you go in the castles and you go in the dungeon areas and you go even see the jail cells and where I mean, that's kind of freaky. And I remember seeing like the execution things, like where they would chop people's heads off and stuff. You'd put your arms in the guillotines. That's the word.
Yes,
Oh
yes.
my gosh. Like as a kid, I was like, dude, no way. Like it did happen. right? But
Right.
that's freaky. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's things like, they used to plunge women into the cold rivers for being nags. You talk to me
Right.
one more time, woman, I'm dunking you. And they did. They dunked
Uh-huh.
us women. Like, what the
Right.
heck, man? You
Yeah.
know? So that kind of history to me is like, it's kind of brutal, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that's what I was said earlier, there were people, the people who lived in the castle lived a very high life, but they
Yeah.
weren't good people in the castle. And that's the other part of the Cardiff Castle that's so fascinating. There's a separate tour of what they call the castle or the mansion
Hmm.
um, apartments. And so this apparently was just maybe in the olden days where the king or whoever was in charge used to stay. But then when the Marquis of Butte, Bute, I don't know if it's Butte, must be Butte. Anyway, when he was he was kind of the appointed overseer of that part of Wales by the King of England, and he was quite a wealthy person, and he was the one who developed the basically the port area where the coal ships were docked and
Oh,
they were
yeah, yeah.
hauling coal. And he was at one time the richest man in the world. He was the Elon Musk of the 1800s. And his castle, he was just kind of apparently a good businessman, but also kind of, he loved the Middle Ages. And so he hired an architect or I guess an architect to come in and basically refashion the apartments into this kind of medieval fantasy house for him.
Wow.
And so it is just, the level of detail, the ballroom, the paintings. I mean, it is just really, kind
Lavish.
yeah, like a fantasy land. We went
Mm.
into his bedroom. It was interesting that the richest man in the world, he was the first person, they said, to have a bathtub and a toilet in his bedroom. So,
Yeah,
but
because don't forget, we used to have outhouses or like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
shoot,
But in
so
his
they
bedroom, was it closed off from his bed or could you see it?
I think there was a door, but it was pretty close. It was pretty close to his bed, and as I said,
Convenience.
our tour guide told us that, I think it was Queen Victoria at the time who was in power, and that he was richer than she was, and that he was the one that got the first, plumbing, the first modern plumbing
Well,
into his apartment.
that's the thing. When you even think about all the castles and everything, it's like, the bathroom thing was a different deal. I mean, they'd have to
Uh,
carry those buckets of slop and what,
uh,
okay, I know that's not the pleasant side of history, but
uh-huh.
the medieval times were not the cleanest of times, right?
Right, that's absolutely the truth. And yeah, when you
But
do
he got
tour
plenty.
some of those castles, you get the sense that there's a whole nother infrastructure that you're not seeing that's
Seeing ex
taking care of the unpleasant
taking
business.
care of business, basically.
Yes, right, literally for
Oh
sure.
my gosh. But wow, so the guy has his first, yeah, yeah, your ensuite bathroom, you know?
Uh-huh.
Oh
Right. So
wow. So
it was pretty wild to see, just how high he lived in his family. He had his children, he had several children, and they had this great playroom where they had all of the fairy tales were painted around the room, like Little
mm,
Red Riding Hood, and just all of the fairy tales. Like some famous artist came in and just painted the fairy tales onto the wall in the children's room. It was just like, oh.
that's cool. That is cool. I like that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That is awesome. So
Uh-huh.
wow, so Cardiff is cool. Now what about dining? Food, because you sent some really cool pictures too of what was the things with the little currants in them? That
Yeah, that's what they call Welsh cakes. And
okay.
so, they're similar to, what you find in the UK and Scotland, but they have their own little twist. They're flakier, they're flatter, and then they put currants in them, and they were
Okay.
really, really good. Now, the other thing that I don't know, I don't think I mentioned, but they do Welsh, like a sandwich or like a patty or like what am I
Oh
thinking?
yeah. Yeah, a patty, like a beef
Meat.
patty.
Yes, a meat
Yeah.
Welsh meat patty. Now, sometimes, as I said, they're similar to other ones you've seen. They just have the word Welsh on them. But I think there is still a bit of pride in them doing things differently. The beer, as I mentioned in story, is often sweetened with honey. Again, this is something that you don't
Wow.
find anywhere else.
Mm.
I don't know that I could tell that much. I'm not a big beer drinker, but I did when I sampled it. It tasted very good. They're very big on seafood because they're very close to the coast. I had some fabulous mussels. I had lots of different fish dishes. I mean, I love seafood. And so if I'm anywhere that offers fresh seafood
Mm.
near, that I feel like is a pretty good chance of being fresh, I mean, I'm all over that. And we had some good meals and some great seafood. But I think the Welsh just have kind of their own spin on dishes that you would normally think, okay, that's British. Well, yes, but it's also, there's a version that's very specifically Welsh,
Welsh.
that it's nice to be able to sample a different, a different way of cooking that they have.
Now, what about getting around with the language too? Because don't they speak Welsh? Like,
Well, it's really, I mean, they've always obviously spoken Welsh since they've been a country, and it's the northern part is much more Welsh in terms of this, using the language than maybe Southern Wales or Cardiff, but it has a lot of consonants in it, the language, and so that does make it hard for me to kind of wrap my hands around, but
yeah.
my mind around. But so I think what they're doing is, is kind of saying, hey, we have our own language and we're not, it's as important to us as English. And so while they recognize that most people do speak English, that they want to preserve their language. And so you find it everywhere. I guess I really wasn't expecting that, but you would read the menu and a version would be in Welsh and a version would be in English. The street signs, I think I sent you one, the name of the town is in Welsh and then it was in English.
Okay.
And it was, I mean, I would look at some of the signs and just be amazed trying to think.
I'm like, how do you even pronounce that? Yeah, I do that with everything. Honestly, at this point, I'm so confused about everything that I just go, I can't pronounce anything. People come on shows, I can get your name right. And then people come on shows and I'm look up someone's name and I'm like, there's like 4 different ways on, how to translate this. And then when they come on, none of the 4 are right. And so I'm at this point, like, I don't know anymore, but Welsh, Gaelic, and even Gaelic, the word Gaelic. And is it Celtic or Celtic? It's like, okay, I don't know.
Right.
But I remember people speaking English when we were there, not having like a hard time getting around, did you ever find that people didn't
No, I
understand
think
you?
everybody that I encountered could speak English as well as Welsh. I mean,
Okay.
I think when we were say in a restaurant in North Wales, I would listen and I could hear that people were actually speaking it to one another.
Right.
So, so I think that people who grew up with it, who traditionally spoke it, continue to do so. And I think that
Which is cool.
and in the schools nowadays that they make a point to make sure that, that children growing up in Wales have at least a basic understanding of the country's language. I mean, there was a time, and I think it's true in a lot of countries, where the English wanted to get rid of Welsh language and wanted to get rid of the Celtic spoken in Scotland. But I think now there's been a realization really across, throughout the world that people's language is part of their culture and part of their heritage. And, it needs to be embraced and it needs to be kept and it needs to be used. And so I think that's what I was impressed with Wales is it's not just lip service. It's serious. They're serious.
And keeping their culture.
Yeah. Keeping and that's what you would, I saw it in lots of places that I wouldn't have thought it would be. So I
That's,
think,
I think that's great. I mean, you look at our Native American folks here in this country, in the United
mhm,
States, so many tribes, or some small ones. And I met a lady in a tribe in Louisiana that's only 600 members of her tribe, which is small. And her dad was the one who got their language into the national like a dictionary put and as a language in
mhm,
Congress, in the Library of Congress Library, whatever, one of the libraries that actually could say, okay, this is a actual language here, and to put like the words and the alphabet and how they speak it in have it documented, because they're such a small tribe, so that they don't lose their language, and that's a huge thing because everything was so verbal. Stories were passed down orally in, the Native American culture. And so now when you think about Wales, English, English, English. I mean, Ireland, yeah, you got your languages too. And even in
mhm,
England, if you listen to someone like the Geordies, I don't know what they're saying at all. I can't understand them, but it's
mhm,
cool to hear. But when you can document and actually keep a culture going, I think it's a beautiful thing. It's integrity to your people and your
mhm,
land, so
mhm.
that's cool that you experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Welsh there's a lot of um, patriotism or just love of country that
Hmm.
I had a sense. And again, I think they weren't, what happened between England and Wales, like what happened between Scotland and England. I mean, there's a lot of history, some of it not so
Hmm.
pleasant, but
Right.
you know, you go forward, and I think make peace and find things to celebrate in your own country.
Hmm.
And that's what it was interesting to me, for example, that on the one hand, the castles, particularly in around Conwy, the four that I mentioned as being part of the Iron Ring, it's kind of like symbolic of the English control of Wales. And yet today those castles are run by the Welsh Tourism Board, and
Hmm.
they make a point to make sure that the story of the castles has to talks about not just the rulers, but the people that were affected by those
Yeah.
castles. And it's very much told in the Welsh voice and from the Welsh perspective, as opposed to strictly as an English castle.
Mm. That's awesome. That's awesome when you think of it, that they're taking that step,
Hmm.
because it is, I think as tourists too, you go like, oh, I'm going to go see the royals,
Hmm.
and I think there's a change happening just generally.
Hmm.
There's a change, is all I'm saying. But that's
Hmm.
cool. That's cool. So you said you would go back, so that's good. And I want everyone to know also, if you plan to go, of course, read Barbara's article on nationalparktraveling.com. The link is in the episode notes, but also go to visitwales.com. And also, I want to, before you go, touch on the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association, which is IFTWA, IFWTWA. Go to ifwtwa.org. Their conference is coming up. So are you going to that one up in upstate New York?
Yes, I'm very excited. We're going to be getting together in Corning, which is where the Corning Glass Museum is, and one of our
Cool.
events is going to be held there. And so I'm really excited to get to see that facility, as well as it's also a very big wine region. And so we're going to
Yay.
have wine tasting and some food events that sound very exciting, as well as opportunities for us to network and to meet with tourism representatives in that part of kind of
Mm.
upstate New York, Pennsylvania, that area. So I think it's going to be a great educational experience, as well
Mm.
as a travel opportunity. I've been to the Finger Lakes, but it's been years ago, so I'm really looking forward to.
There's new wine for you to try out there, from what I've
Yes,
heard
yeah,
and tasted too. It's good.
that's
It's
right.
good. And apparently they do ice cream really well up in upstate New York, and really good hamburgers, from what I've heard. And I know because you got the Laurel Highlands near you out there too. And Seneca
Mhm.
Falls is near there. I know you're going to go there too, right? You're going to go check that out, that beautiful area.
Yes, yeah. Seneca
And
Falls and
Niagara
Cayuga.
Falls too. I mean,
Uh-huh.
all that waterfalls
Yes,
everywhere.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the the countryside of upstate New York. Sounds very exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to have you on the show. Everyone, keep up with Barbara at barbararedding.com. Follow her adventures there. And that's what you are on social media too. Barbara Redding for everyone on Facebook, Instagram, right? Twitter too? X, I mean.
Really
Did I say X?
They do. I do have a Twitter account. I'm not that active on Twitter anymore, or X, but I am on Facebook and
Are you an X of X?
X of X, yes. Well, as I said, I still have an account. I post some things, but not as much as I did in the past. But that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody's got their thing, man. You can't do it all. That's for sure. There's so many. No. And I think a lot of times people are doing Instagram, for photos, and it's with your travels and everything. It makes sense. So good to have you on the show. We'll be talking again soon. So thank you so much.
All
Safe
right,
travels.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFWTWA, which is IFWTWA.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone.